Welcome to PatsCast from New Orleans. The Patriots escape with a 25-19 victory against not only the New Orleans Saints, but the horrendous officiating that we saw at the Superdome on Sunday. Really just a strange game, and the flags were going both ways for sure, but it definitely hit the Patriots a lot harder. A lot of missed DPI calls, a lot of ticky-tack calls on the Patriots. This should have been a game where they won by at least 2 scores, and really they were escaping with the victory there in the fourth quarter. But a win is a win. The Patriots improve to 4-2, the first time they've had a record that good since 2019. And heading into this game, I had a few keys to the game in which I was thinking about the Patriots. Can they make the leap from a good team to a great team? And I'll go through those right now before we break down, the quarterback, the wide receiver, of course, the awful officiating, and also talk about my experience here at the Superdome, which is just an incredible atmosphere to watch a football game. But the first key of the game, the New York Giants turned the football over 5 times last week when they played the New Orleans Saints. They have a defense that really is effective at taking the football away from the other team. Patriots played a clean football game, outside of, the penalties and all the stuff they went through. Most importantly, Drake Maye, another near flawless game, one of the best games of his career. I feel like I'm saying that pretty much every week, but no interceptions, no fumbles. Ramondre Stevenson managed to hold on to the football. I saw him going to the ground with 2 hands on the ball for once, and he seems to be getting a little bit better at that. But overall, Patriots played a clean football game, didn't shoot themselves in the foot, where we've seen them do it many times this season, particularly the Raiders game in Week 1 in the 5-turnover game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But check that box there. Drake Maye did an excellent job at taking care of the football and the offense as a whole, whereas the defense also forced some turnovers. A great strip from Christian Ellis on a play where the officials called him down. Mike Vrabel threw the red flag, and the Patriots won the challenge. And that was a momentum shift because it really did look like the Saints were driving the ball down the field. They were marching. They were just kind of dumping it off to the middle of the field, which we've talked about many times on this podcast. The Patriots, they have great DBs, but when it comes to the linebackers, when it comes to defending the middle of the field, they often just leave it for the offenses, and they were doing that. So a key play there by Christian Ellis to knock the ball out, and Patriots get the ball back, and that was enough to get them in a situation where they could really manage it late in the fourth quarter. But some of the other keys didn't go so well for the Patriots, and I know they won today, but this was far from a perfect game. I mentioned last week the Patriots only had 1 sack. I wanted to see at least 3 in this game, and, they had a couple. So that was an improvement from last week, but still need to be more effective at getting to the quarterback. It looks like Harold Landry went down early in the game, but he managed to stay out there. No excuses on why they can't generate a real pass rush. They were generating a pass rush Week 1 against the Raiders. I don't really know what happened to it, but they need to get a little bit better at that as well. Establishing the run. This is still the biggest weakness. Heading into the season, we thought it would be the greatest strength. The Patriots have Stevenson. They have Travion Henderson. They had Antonio Gibson before he went down with an injury. They called up Jennings from the practice squad this week. Still were incapable of running the football. Had 73 yards total, but of course the leading rusher was the quarterback, Drake Maye. So Travion Henderson, just 9 carries for 27 yards, and Stevenson had the majority of the carries, 13, but was only able to muster up about 18 yards. So same deal as last week. It's not the initial blocking. It's the second level stuff. It's having tight ends that are really just pass catchers out there that, as much as I love Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper, they need to do a better job at blocking. So still can't establish the run. They're playing basically a one-dimensional game on offense, which is a credit to Josh McDaniels. It's a credit to Drake Maye that they were having explosive plays left and right. They had some explosive plays that were wiped off the board because of the officiating, but this game was won from the efficiency and the passing of Drake Maye. But if they're going to beat better teams, and I don't think the Saints are a very good team, although I think their offense is better than we thought, they need to have a real running game because they depend so much on play action, on bootlegs, getting Maye on his feet where he has options to throw the ball downfield, and you can't really do that if you can't run the ball through the trenches. So And it wasn't even that. It was the wide zone stuff. They weren't being able to run the ball on the outside. New Orleans did an excellent job of setting the edge all game long. Needs to get a little bit better there. Again, this is not going to be a fully negative podcast, but this was a game that the Patriots, like I said, should have won by 2 scores. And the officiating didn't help, but if your best running back carries the ball 13 times and only gets 18 yards, you're averaging just a little over 1 yard a carry. That's not going to cut it. Finally, penalties. That's been an issue all season long. I said I would love to see the Patriots have 6 penalties or less. They weren't even close. They had 11 penalties. They were not back-breaking penalties, unlike last week. I think last week they had 9, but still had 93 yards worth of penalties. This week, they had 2 more, but it was only about 65 yards. But they need to play cleaner football. A lot of those were ticky-tack calls, but even if you take those out, we're talking 8 or 9 penalties. It's not something that's important to Mike Vrabel, but it's going to cost some games down the road when they're playing Tampa, when they're playing Buffalo again, when they're playing Baltimore, if they're back at full strength. They need to be able to play more clean football and not have so many penalties. And finally, as I said, if the Patriots are going to make that leap from a good team to a great team, they have to be able to beat up on bad football teams. And I consider the Saints to be a bad football team. And I said the accomplishment would be 9 points or more. Well, they only won by 6. Should have been a lot more than that. Now, they were running the clock there near field goal range at the end of the game. They probably could have won this game by at least 2 scores. And, you know, some of the penalties that were wiped certain plays off the board were not great. So my 5 keys to the game, the Patriots really only accomplished 1 of them, but it's a testament to Drake Maye. It's a testament to Josh McDaniels. And the defense, which looked a lot better there in the second half than they did in the first half. I don't think the Saints punted once in the first half. So they're winning because of Maye. They're winning because of McDaniels, and they're winning because their receiving core, they're having different guys step up. Stephon Diggs, obviously, the last couple of weeks was the go-to receiver. Today, Diggs didn't do a lot, but they had great play, of course, coming from Kayshon Boutte, who was really the star of the game. And this was not one of my keys, but I said at some point a number 2 receiver is going to have to emerge. And is that Kayshon Boutte? I'm not sure. Well, he stepped up today, caught all 5 of his targets, 93 yards, 2 touchdowns, an incredible 50-50 ball physical play on a deep throw from Drake Maye to get into the end zone. Really excellent game by Kayshon Boutte, and if he's able to step up like that, and they're able to spread the ball around, we knew the Saints were going to focus on Stephon Diggs this game. Double team, he's not in there. He plays about 50% of the time, but with all the focus on Diggs, you need some of the other guys to step up, which they really haven't the last couple of weeks. Today, Kayshon Boutte stepped up. Demario Douglas stepped up, 3 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. Should have been 2 touchdowns, but they're getting productive play from their receivers. Even Mac Hollins, 28 yards on 2 catches. Stephon Diggs, 3 catches, also 28 yards. Hunter Henry, they're not completely dependent on Hunter Henry as we saw the first few weeks of the season. He still had 3 catches for 27 yards. So really an excellent job by Drake Maye spreading the football around, and Patriots had to overcome a lot in this game. This is not an easy place to come down in New Orleans, especially off of a high victory in Buffalo. Coming down here, the Saints had a big win last week against the Giants at home. Loud crowd, although I would say it's probably 40% Patriots fans, but they stepped up in spite of the environment, in spite of having a very difficult step-back game after beating the Bills, coming into New Orleans, and surviving the officiating. So there were a few very bad calls in this game. So I just mentioned the Demario Douglas touchdown. I think it was a 51-yard bomb. That was called one of the weirdest offensive pass interference penalties I've ever seen. And I still watch it back on the replay, and I really don't know what happened. And sitting in the crowd, I still had no idea. And it was very unusual because the Patriots were lined up, ready to kick the extra point, and the refs just decided, oh no, we're going to call it back. Looked like they really wanted New Orleans to win this game. So that was wiped off the board. There was a 3rd and 17 play that should have been, could have iced the game potentially. And that was an offensive pass interference call on Stephon Diggs. Go watch the play. I mean, it was a physical play that you see every single down in the NFL, and they decided to penalize Maye. There were also some missed calls. Patriots, I think they were in a 3rd and 31 situation, and Drake Maye really just, he didn't care. They were not being cautious in these super third and long situations when they're dealing with penalties. They were going for first downs, even on 3rd and 31. Drake Maye threw a bomb down the field, really a perfect throw to Mac Hollins, who was pushed on the play. They didn't call it. That probably would have iced the game had that been called as well. So yeah, it was terrible both ways. The Saints certainly had their fair share of penalties, but ultimately it hit the Patriots a lot harder. And just tired of these games where it's all about watching the referees. And hopefully we don't have as many of these, but like I said, this was a game the Patriots should have won by 2 scores, and the refs really did everything they could to prevent them from that. But the reason they won this game, as I've said many times, is Drake Maye. He was 18 of 26 passing for 261 yards, 3 touchdowns, had a passer rating. I'll look it up right here real quick. I think it was 141 passer rating, which is the second best game of the season. I think he had about 150 against Miami back in week 2. And it's not even just the numbers, because the numbers are not, they don't jump off the page, but it's the efficiency. It's taking care of the football. It's the scramble plays. I mean, just watching Drake Maye in person, his pocket presence, and this is something that's gotten better week to week. We talked about last week, when the pocket begins to collapse, keeping his head up, keeping his eyes downfield. He really struggled with that against the Bills. I didn't see that this game. I didn't see that, and his ability to escape pressure, whether he's trying to scramble with the ball, even just dumping it off or throwing it out of bounds to get to the next play. He took a sack today that was actually, I think, a pretty smart sack to take. He probably could have thrown it out on that play, but he is playing like a quarterback that's been in the NFL for 5-6 years now. And all the stuff that we worried about with Drake Maye, his accuracy, his decision-making, particularly late in the game or in close games, the turnovers, all that stuff, at least the last 3 weeks, have not been an issue. So Drake Maye just continues to play excellent football, and he didn't have to rely on Stephon Diggs. It felt like the last couple of weeks, they snapped the ball, and Drake Maye was always looking at Stephon Diggs. That wasn't the case today, because the defenses were going to pay a little bit more attention. And you'll have to see the tape. I talked about the teams were playing a lot more, cover 1. They were stacking the box. And it looked like we saw a little bit more cover 2 today, which probably put a little bit more pressure on Stephon Diggs. Drake Maye knew what to do with the football the entire game. And that's why you saw a big performance today from Kayshon Boutte, from Demario Douglas, from all the receivers. They all stepped up. Really, the only guy who I didn't think played well was Kyle Williams, and I'll get to that in just a second. But the 29-yard touchdown to Kayshon Boutte was just an incredible throw. He wasn't even open. Threw it just over the defender's head where Kayshon Boutte can only come up with it. Kind of a bang-bang catch. The defender tried to rip it out of his hands. I was sitting in that end zone when it happened, and I was shocked that it was completion. I thought the ball probably would have fallen out of his hands. He managed to hold on to it. And then Maye comes back with the 2-point conversion that I filmed it. I still don't know how he got over the line, but somehow he did. I'm not sure this is going to be sustainable for Drake Maye week to week. Is he going to be in the 140s or 150s every week? Probably not. But right now, he has to be in the MVP conversation. I know we're only 6 weeks into the season, but he continues to be arguably the most efficient passer in the NFL, which is crazy to say because he's a dual threat quarterback, but he's settled into this McDaniels offense, and he knows what to do pre-snap. He reads the defenses. He goes through the progression. He's able to check into another play, which he didn't necessarily have the ability to do last year. And the receivers ultimately stepped up. Kayshon Boutte, former LSU player, 93 yards, 5 of 5 on targets, 2 touchdowns, and had a huge clutch catch, probably his best catch of the game, frankly, on 3rd and 11, which ultimately sealed the game. And, obviously it was an emotional game for him coming back to Louisiana. He's finally playing like the guy his first year at LSU, where you said, this is one of the best. I think he might have been the highest-ranked high school player coming into LSU, the highest-ranked recruit. Had a very good year 1, changed the coaching staff. He found himself in the doghouse, ended up being a 6th-round pick. But we're seeing Kayshon Boutte probably should have been a 2nd or 3rd round pick at this point, and he really had a great game. Demario Douglas, who's been essentially non-existent the first 5 weeks of the season, other than a touchdown catch in week 1, 3 catches for 71 yards. Should have been 4 catches for 132 yards if it weren't for that flag that actually wasn't thrown on the play where they called it back. Just one of the weirdest officiating games I've ever watched, particularly in person. There's just so much confusion when you're not watching the telecast, and they're not throwing the flag, and they're going up for the extra point, and then they call it back, and the Saints fans start cheering. Very strange, but his speed, his route precision was very good. I thought he settled into the zone nicely. He found the soft spots, which has always been a struggle with Demario Douglas the first 2 years and the first few weeks of this season. He's slowly becoming Maye's safety valve, and if you're going to go against defenses, especially ones that run a lot of man-to-man, you want Demario Douglas on the field, and he really stepped up today, which is great because you didn't have to rely on Stephon Diggs, who had 2 killer penalties that really shouldn't have been penalties, but ultimately, watching it in person, I'm not worried that Stephon Diggs is going to start complaining about his lack of targets, as he did in Buffalo, as he did in Minnesota, because the other receivers are stepping up. He's still having his big games, as he did last week and the week before. So really great to see. Kyle Williams, on the other hand, I think he had, 3 targets in this game, and really was not on the same page as Drake Maye throughout this game. The first one, to his credit, he drew a defensive pass interference, but I don't think he really had anything to do with that. But Drake Maye threw a bomb down the sideline, like a 50-yard throw, and Kyle Williams had no idea the ball was heading his way. Then there was another play where it was a tough catch. It was a little bit high for him, but a guy who's going to be drafted in the second round has to make that catch. Kyle Williams wasn't able to come up with it. And then there was another one where he cut in when Drake Maye was throwing it outside, more of a back shoulder type throw, and they clearly weren't on the same page. So a little bit worried about Kyle Williams. Don't want this to be another draft bust. He's trying to find his way into the rotation, but I think the good news there is Efton Chisholm was elevated. His first game on the active roster really was only in there for kick returns. They had Jennings and Chisholm in there for the kick returns, which is interesting, instead of having Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson as we saw last week. I mean, I'm glad Stevenson isn't returning kicks. Maybe they know they have to rely on Henderson a lot more now with Gibson out, so they don't want that additional responsibility on him. But I thought Efton Chisholm looked pretty good on the kick returns, but you have to ask the question, with the performance of Kyle Williams today, who, was probably only in the game like 15% of the reps, if I have to guess, really wasn't in there much, does that role end up being Efton Chisholm's role? I'm not sure, because Chisholm is more effective as like your Welker Edelman slot receiver, not really an outside guy, and that is where they're lining up Kyle Williams. But I think at a certain point you have to work him into the game. I mean, just watching him in warmups, again, he's not the fastest receiver, but very quick, excellent hands. I think he would have caught that ball that Kyle Williams missed early in the game. I'd love to see him in the rotation a little bit more, but that also might mean, putting Stephon Diggs on the outside where they seem to be more comfortable with him in the slot. Less playing time for Mac Hollins, who really is effective when they throw the ball his way, not to mention what he can bring to the table as a blocker. But they need to find the right combination. I think Kayshon Boutte, he earned that number 2 role in camp, and today he's going to stay in that number 2 role with the way that he played. But it's that like 5th receiver that they need to figure out, whether that's Kyle Williams. Maybe you give him another year, give Chisholm some reps. Maybe they split reps, but I'd love to see him worked in a little bit more. But the reason the Patriots had to rely on the passing game so much is they still cannot run the football. They average just 2.8 yards per carry, no explosion, no rhythm. Really, the only reason they ran the ball was to set up the play action, to set up the bootleg so Drake Maye can do what he does best. Mike Onwenu really seems to be struggling in the running game. I think he's been arguably the best pass blocker on the team, but just cannot run block to save his life. Garrett Bradbury, which was his greatest strength, run blocking, not pass blocking, that's been flipped on his head. He has not been an effective run blocker. He also had a really bad snap on a questionable 4th and 7 call. I don't know why Mike Vrabel went for it there. It was 3rd and 7. In 4th down territory, they basically said, all right, we're going to run the ball on 3rd down. We have 2 shots to get a first down here. So they run it with Stevenson, no gain, which is why I said maybe you do punt it here, because now you're at 4th and 7. Didn't matter. They went for it, And then Garrett Bradbury had a horrendous snap, wasn't even close to Drake Maye, who managed to fall on it and prevent the defense from running it back into the end zone. That also set up the Saints for a scoring drive themselves. So it was not clean football, I would say. It was clean football from Drake Maye, but the offensive line, the gap discipline, the inside zone reads, maybe they start mixing in some RPOs, but that's not exactly Josh McDaniels' foray, as great as Drake Maye is at that stuff. But I don't know. This is something they're going to have to figure out. And like I said in the last podcast, maybe they just become a West Coast wide zone team. I know that's an unusual thing for a Josh McDaniels offense. That's what they tried to do last year with Alex Van Pelt and the year before with the Matt Patricia disaster, but they seem to run the ball much more effectively on the outside, where the blockers have a zone to cover instead of trying to do the power stuff, the duos. The duo stuff worked a little bit today, but I think they have to run more of a modern offense, especially with Drake Maye's traits. Like, you might have to just run the Kyle Shanahan offense and mix in some of the McDaniel stuff in there. And they have been doing that a lot more, but I think they're going to need to lean into it because the power run obviously is not working thus far in the season, and they need to get better at it. They were worse running the football today than they were last week in Buffalo, which is really saying something. Because this Saints, their front is, I don't think Buffalo had the greatest defensive front. I think the Saints are arguably worse, and they couldn't step up. Now, it helped that, you're in a dome, it's loud, the defense is going to step up a lot more in those situations, but, man, they really need to figure out how to run the football because, I know Drake Maye only threw it 26 times, but like I said, you cannot expect him to consistently put on his cape and carry this team as he's done each of the last 3 weeks. And maybe he can, and maybe that's why he does belong in the MVP conversation at this point in time, but I just don't know if you're going to be able to stay that consistent with Drake Maye. But, man, he looks like a veteran quarterback out there and really overcompensating for the running game, overcompensating for the defense, who, as I said, didn't force a punt at all in the first half. The first play of the game, there was a blown coverage. They had a corner blitz, sending Carlton Davis at the quarterback right away, and then Kyle Duggar, who's slow as molasses as a safety, has to go catch up with Chris Olave. They get a 53-yard gain. Horrible blitz design, but even if you're going to run that type of play, which the Patriots do from time to time, you don't do it on the first play of the game. That gave the Saints immediate momentum. Now, thankfully, the defense tightened up after that. They stopped them, forced a field goal, and they really stepped up there in the fourth quarter to actually start forcing some punts. But overall, it's still bend but don't break. They seem to play a lot of soft coverage. They give them the 5 or 6 yards and say, you're going to have a 15, 16 play drive in order to score against us. We'll give you a little bit, but eventually you're going to make a mistake, which did happen today with the Christian Ellis forced fumble. So really great job by Christian Ellis, who I haven't really been a fan of this season, but I think this was his best game. He's quietly earning more snaps, and I think he'll be out there a lot more next week. Marcus Jones looked like he was going down with an injury. I didn't know if we were going to see him back on the field. Ended up with 3 pass breakups. He also had a sack and a third down lockdown that he broke up the play there that was bang, but he managed to not get a penalty. Thought Robert Spillane continues to be a solid anchor, again in the middle. I thought the Saints had a really strong game plan heading into this game. They knew, look, the Patriots are 4th in the NFL heading into week 6 in terms of run defense. They can't run it between the tackles, so we're not even going to try. They just had Kamara running it on the outside, really forcing the Patriots to go side to side, and then you can attack the middle a little bit more. That's exactly what they did, and that's why they really were highly productive there in the first half. I'll have to rewatch it to see what the defensive adjustments were and why the Patriots played a lot better there in the second half, but it was a strong game plan. I actually think Spencer Rattler's a pretty good quarterback. He looks really small out there. He can't be more than 6 feet tall, but the guy that we saw last season in New Orleans versus this year, I know they got Tyler Shuck and they expect him to eventually be their starter, but the way Rattler's playing right now, I know they only have 1 win. They're 1-5 now, but he was not the reason they lost this game. Spencer Rattler, I'm glad I was making the argument a year ago the Patriots should draft Marvin Harrison and then take Rattler in the second or third round, and then he's your future quarterback. Thank God they didn't do that. But I think he's earned this starting spot, and I'll be shocked if we see Tyler Shuck out there next week or a few weeks down the road. Again, this was not Spencer Rattler's doing. That's why they lost the game. I don't think he had anything to do with it. He can run with the football, goes through the progression very well. He stayed in the pocket, had a ton of time to throw the ball. As I said, the Patriots still struggle to generate any sort of pass rush. But he was not the reason they lost this game. The reason the Saints lost is because they only had 73 yards rushing on the ground, and of course 20 of those came from Rattler himself. So only 52 yards combined between Kendre Miller and Alvin Kamara. So that's ultimately the reason. Patriots continue to just run stuff every single play what they can. And they're not as good against the outside zone, and that's why the Saints were so productive early in the game. But, as much as we harp on the defense for giving up plays in the middle of the field, Carlton Davis, who I don't think has been quite as productive as we thought, he got burned a few times today. But overall, you can't run on the Patriots, and you're going to be forced to throw. They're covering deep, so they aren't giving up a lot of explosive plays other than that first play of the game because it was a corner blitz. Teams are going to have very long, unsustainable drives to beat this defense, and I think that's ultimately their greatest strength. And the reason why, even when they're not playing super well, they can give the offense enough of a chance and hold on to the lead. And that's what happened today. They're winning ugly, but they're ultimately winning situationally, and that's the kind of culture that Mike Vrabel has brought to New England. I do think Duggar, after that first, blown coverage there on the first play of the game, he did look a little bit better. I'm not the biggest Kyle Duggar fan, but he's out there a lot of snaps now. Like, he's not in the doghouse like he was during the preseason. I thought he looked a little bit better as the game went on. Jelani Tavai continues to rack up penalties whenever he's on the field. So, I don't know. I'm not the biggest Tavai guy. But I thought Vrabel, this was an excellent coach game from him. Obviously, there was the offensive pass interference that wiped out a 51-yard play when it looked like the Patriots were going to put up 40 points once again. But I thought the late game management was great. Kayshon Boutte had a catch where he stayed in bounds. That comes with the coaching, right? I think last year, Kayshon Boutte would have run out of bounds because it would have been the more easy play to do. Instead, he catches it. Instead of trying to be a hero, stays in bounds, keeps the clock running. And that's why the Patriots won it. It was a really excellent fourth quarter drive there where they had a good balance between running the football, draining the clock, and also having quick, short throws that were in bounds that Drake Maye can make easily. Really effective game. Ultimately, they won this because of Drake Maye. He's now strung together 4 excellent performances. They're learning to win in very different situations week to week. The defense, they do seem a little bit banged up right now. Players are definitely playing through injury, but they're still finding ways to win. And the refs did the Patriots no favors today. This is no longer a rebuild, right? Now we're not just talking like Patriots are a wild card team. Bills are on Monday night tomorrow. If somehow they can't win on the road at Atlanta, Patriots are going to be the first place team in the AFC East, which is shocking to say 6 weeks through the season. And Bills have a fairly easy schedule, but it's still a first place schedule, much more difficult than what the Patriots have. They could just take the division because the Patriots are just beating up on bad teams week after week. But you got to keep stringing together these wins. Next week, you're on the road against Tennessee. Bad football team. Home against the Browns. Really bad football team. And they have a chance here to improve to, 7-2 before they have to go on the road to Tampa in a real tough matchup. Tampa's beating the Niners 14-10 right now, so that's an interesting game to watch. Mac Jones continues to play pretty well, and he might actually earn that starting role. But I have to say, come to a game in New Orleans. This is a great place to watch a football game. We sat in section 101 right in the end zone where Adam Vinatieri hit the game-winning field goal to give the Patriots their first Super Bowl. Love the old-school scoreboard that I remember from that Super Bowl, but they've done a lot of renovations, perhaps because the Super Bowl was there last year. The concourses, they're tight. It's an old stadium, but very clean. Lots of different concessions. The food obviously is the best in the country here in New Orleans, and they're selling all that stuff. You can get jambalaya at the game. Really great atmosphere to watch a game. Probably the second loudest stadium I've attended a game at. I still think Denver was louder because, I don't know, actually, it's an outdoor stadium in Denver, so I give them a lot of credit for how loud that stadium is. But because this is indoors, it looked like a sellout crowd today. We're sitting underneath the overhang of the second level, so it's even louder where we were at. Not a great place to take photos, lots of shadows. You can tell it's an old stadium, but really just kind of a classic NFL atmosphere, a great place to watch an indoor football game. That said, once you're actually sitting down, you realize, oh, this is an old stadium. The seats are not very wide, not a ton of leg room. It's kind of like going to a game at Fenway, no cup holders. We're sitting on the aisle, so I had to constantly stand up and have people pushing us around as they tried to exit the aisle. Also, the bathroom situation is a nightmare at the Superdome. They do not have anywhere near enough bathrooms. Huge lines, not just at halftime, all game long. You're going to have to stand 10, 15 minutes in line to use the restroom because there's only 8 urinals in there and 3 stalls, and that covers half of the lower level. There's 2 bathrooms in the end zone that you can work. So it's not, if you're looking for a comfortable football game, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're looking for great atmosphere, it's worth coming to a game here. Of course, Saints fans, very hospitable, light trash talk before the game, saying congrats after the game. So just a really great environment to watch a football game. Just don't expect to be comfortable for all 4 quarters, and don't expect to pee more than twice throughout the game. This was a Coke Zero game for me. I didn't buy any beers, so thankfully I only had to use the restroom a couple times. That may be TMI for this podcast, but it is worth coming here. It's definitely worth coming here. Great experience, great to come out with a win, and we got the Mike Vrabel revenge game next week back in Tennessee, so that's going to be great. So ultimately, great victory from the Patriots, 25-19. They survived the refs. They survived a much more productive New Orleans offense than I was expecting. I think Spencer Rattler is a legitimate quarterback. He's not a top 10, top 15 guy, but he is more than competent out there. Booty, effective wide receiver number 2. I think the Pats are eventually going to have to make a move for another running back, but it's not just the running backs, right? It's the second level blocking. It's Who's blocking. It's Bradbury's blocking. They need to be able to run through the tackle, or else they may have to warp this offense into more of the Kyle Shanahan West Coast style offense. But next week they're on the road against Tennessee. Bad calls, horrible officiating all day today, but the Patriots overcame it. They continue to overcome tough situations that they're put in. And Drake Maye playing MVP level football. And it's not just him putting up numbers. It's his efficiency on third down. I mean, he is, at least heading into this week, he was by far the most efficient quarterback in the NFL on third and fourth down. And he continued to be that today. Play clean football. Didn't fumble. Didn't throw any interceptions. Excellent game for Drake Maye. And it wasn't clean, it was sloppy, but the Patriots win by 6 in New Orleans. 4-2 record now, winning record, 2 games above 500, and now they're fighting for the division against the Buffalo Bills. So we'll be back throughout the week here at PatsCast, and if you like this video and you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll see you throughout the week.